Hello guys, welcome back to the shop. Another episode of HolsterLife. Boy, looking really washed out here. That's better, there we go. So tonight's topic is disruption. I'm going to be talking about some business theory stuff, the holster industry, how my business has changed in 2018 and how I think it's going to change in 2019. Hello Riley Schreiner, hello Brent Fernandez, thanks for stopping in guys. If you are a holster maker, please leave your company name in the comments. Hello, Todd May. Disruption is a term that gets thrown around a lot. Hey, Keith Freeman. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what disruption is and what it isn't, and why you should plan to disrupt your own business before you let other people do it for you. Hi, Mark Lancaster. So, when I've read business books, business blogs, listened to various podcasts, hi Tom Kelly, disruption is probably the second most overused and or misused term. The number one term I think is innovation. Innovation is just like, it's like MSG. It gets put on everything. The difference is that MSG actually makes everything better and talking about innovation doesn't. But disruption is a popular way of talking about a very broad category of things. Technically, they're not all disruption. So I had some links pulled up here that I wanted to quickly mention. The idea of disruptive innovation as a business concept has an actual definition. It has a history of discussion in articles and books, drawing mostly on the work of Clayton Christensen and his book, The Innovator's Dilemma, which I haven't read excerpts, seems reasonable. I'm sure, he gets kind of into the weeds. It's kind of a more of a data-driven big business thing. But he defines disruption in a very specific way, which is not the way that most small business entrepreneurs generally talk about disruption, or the way that most consumers understand disruption in a business environment. So, a little bit about what I mean by disruption, just so I'm clear on my terms. Disruption is separate from success. It's not a requirement for a business to be disruptive in order for the business to be successful or profitable. Lots and lots of very successful businesses are not disruptive at all. One of the critical factors in being truly disruptive in a technical sense is you need often to create a new market in order to be really disruptive. So, or access a market that wasn't previously accessible. So an example would be, hey, Aaron Brass. An example would be that early automobiles, luxury automobiles in the beginning of the 20th century, were not disruptive in the same way that Henry Ford's Model T was. Because the Model T is what actually disrupted horse-drawn transportation, because it was the first automobile to be cost-effective enough to be approachable, to be available to a large enough percentage of the population that it stood a real chance of tipping over the paradigm of how transportation is done, how goods are moved, all this stuff. And so one of the interesting things when I looked at examples of business innovations and disruptions, in a lot of cases, they don't happen immediately. It's not that a new company launches and the writing is on the wall on day one and everyone knows that it's going to be disruptive. In many cases, it takes years, sometimes 5 to 10 years, for a disruption to really saturate the market. But then it's kind of like an iceberg tipping over. A lot of little things add up, and then at a certain point, stuff flips. And a certain behavior, a pattern of buying, a certain product or a brand or some disruptive thing moves from being fairly niche to then moving out at large scale, and then the disruption becomes evident to everybody. It's a big deal. So I want to talk about a few specific innovations in the holster field and whether or not they're disruptive for small business owners. So for the customer, holsters are holsters generally. And the guys who bought leather holsters 50 years ago, hey, Chuck Burgess, guys who were 25 years old buying their first leather holster 50 years ago are not significantly different in terms of what they're looking for than guys who are 25 and buying their first Kydex holster today. They wanted to hold a gun. They wanted to hold the gun securely and comfortably so they can wear the gun all day. That's it. That's what a holster does. And so within the holster industry, different kinds of products exist appendix was around for a while, then sort of went away, and now is back. And different styles of carry come and go in popularity based on tons of different factors. But the concept of a holster, what it's supposed to do, isn't disruptive. And certain very identifiable holster styles, like the T-Rex sidecar, even though they were not the only company or even necessarily the first company to make a monolithic gun mag carrier holster primarily for appendix carry, they definitely were the ones that popularized that among people my age and younger. Hello, Aunt Shirley. And even though hybrid holsters were around before crossbreed, Mark Craighead and Crossbreed Holsters were largely responsible for popularizing the leather-backed hybrid holster. And those holsters aren't disruptive in a pure sense because they don't create a new market, really. Although you could possibly argue that a different style of holster would allow you to reach a new set of customers who would not have purchased a more traditional type of holster. So maybe you could make that argument. Things that are really disruptive affect stuff at a more foundational level. So things that have been disruptive, one of the most obvious examples that almost every blog post that I've read about on the topic of business disruption referenced was Netflix versus Blockbuster. And that was largely because Blockbuster didn't see what was coming. Nobody 25 years ago, people didn't think that streaming on devices was going to be the way that we consumed film media. That was not on anybody's radar. Movie theaters reigned supreme, VHS rental shops were a big deal, and then DVDs came out. And even though DVDs were an improvement of the technology, better fidelity, more user control, those weren't disruptive in the sense they didn't really change the model of consumption. Netflix changed the model of consumption. E-commerce sales, having the internet be accessible to everybody, almost everybody, with an internet connection who can then do most of their shopping online, that's a real disruption, but no single company did that. No single business made the internet a thing so that they could sell their product. But it definitely has disrupted the way that a lot of industries normally do their sales. The local gun store used to be where you would go to buy a holster. And now the vast majority of holsters purchased in the under 40 demographic, I don't have hard data on this. This is my gut based on my impression of how the market's working. The vast majority of that gear is purchased online. And a lot of people buy things that they've never held or seen in person before. The days of, I've got to put my hands on it, it's just not as big a deal anymore. And that's disruptive to a lot of the local gun stores, the kinds of customers, hey, Tim and Tactical, the kinds of customers that those gun stores would normally rely on for business, hello, Coley, a lot of them aren't shopping much in gun stores anymore. I don't remember the last time I've bought accessories at a gun store. I need mags, order online. I need ammo, order online. I need Trijicon RMR, order online. It's easier. I can do it at 1 o'clock in the morning while I'm home and I think of it. I'm sitting down in my shop. I grab my laptop. I hop on the web and order the thing I need. And a couple days later, it shows up and I'm good. But on the small scale, looking at how individual small businesses get disrupted or pushed out of the market is a question that interests me because I am a small and vulnerable business. How is it that businesses like mine die? What happens to them that causes them to fail? Hey, Alan Morrison. So there are a couple things I was thinking about as I've looked back on what my business did in previous years. In 2010, 2011, build to order with long lead times was standard. Pretty much every holster company was operating under that paradigm. Customers would place an order, and in many cases, like you had to place an order by email or you had to place an order by phone call. A lot of holster companies didn't even really have functioning e-commerce sites as late as 2010, 2011. I didn't. And I took most of my orders by email at that point. And that meant that nothing was in stock, nothing ever shipped next day. Guys would get put on the build schedule, and then I would build whenever I got to them in the schedule. which was something that customers were willing to put up with until enough holster companies became responsive enough and also narrowed their product lines enough to be able to afford to inventory more stuff or quick ship more stuff, that the customer expectation totally changed. And customer expectations and customer standards can disrupt and kill a small business like mine. If I was still operating under a 2012 paradigm in terms of how I expect customer reactions and customer service to work, and I deliver a good product but at a time frame that no one is used to anymore, that everyone expects to not be the case. Shouldn't have to wait 6 weeks for my holster. I should be able to get it shipped immediately. Why? In an Amazon Prime world, that bends everyone's expectation on all consumer goods in the direction of, well, it should be in stock and it should ship immediately and it should ship for free. Free shipping used to actually be a real bonus that people got excited about. And nowadays, running into anybody who doesn't ship for free is more unusual. Hey, Sergeant Moose. So, I'm going to talk about disruption in that sense now. What throws off or wrecks or kills a small business like mine? And it used to be things like local competition could really disrupt you. If you had a holster shop and you had a particular city that was your area, where you had your customers and you dealt with those police departments and those gun stores, and another holster shop opened up in the area, that could be real disruption for you. That could wreck your sales model. That could wreck your business plan. That could take away your customers, and you could go out of business. Now we're all competing in, at the very least, a national market, if not an international market, depending on what company you are and where you ship to. And so I'm literally competing against guys from Florida, California, and Alaska in a market all the time. And the relative distance is largely irrelevant for the customer. For the customer, it makes no difference really whether they're ordering a holster from New Mexico or New Hampshire. Within a couple days, it's going to be at their door. And so the things that differentiate us now are price and quality and the features that our products have. And those have always been part of what we would use to sell a product. But as the other things, as lead time has stopped becoming as big a differentiator, as much of a sales point, companies that relied on that more heavily, like, we're more expensive, but we ship faster. Well, people are less patient for that increase in price. I got a hair stuck on my hat. They're less patient for that. What is up with that? I think my daughter was wearing my hat today. They're less patient for that because everybody ships fast, or everybody should ship fast. The good old days of every single page of your website having in bright red, size 36 font, bold, underlined, lead time 6 to 8 weeks at the top of every single page, so that no matter where anybody went on your website, they would have to see that, so they couldn't say, oh, I didn't know. Those days are gone. Some companies still have that, but generally, as a trend in the industry, that's largely gone. So for me, disruption would be running into a situation where the sales model that I'm currently using stops working well. And customers that I've had have started going other places, either because I don't offer the product they want. We've got four people now, Alan. Me and my buddy Eric and 2 part-timers. Pretty fun. If a customer wants a product that I don't offer, then obviously they have to go someplace else to get it. And that pressure of expanding your product line to retain more customers or attract more customers versus keeping your product line narrow so you can focus on maximizing the quality and the speed of your product delivery for the customers who want that thing that you have. That's a constant tension that businesses have to weigh. And it's that distinction between the customers who I offer something for and those that I don't, that is actually the seedbed where a lot of real disruptive innovation actually happens, because companies, logically, tend to focus on their most profitable customers. I don't spend most of my time and most of my energy focusing on customers who I make the least money off of. I focus on customers who buy from me repeatedly, who buy my core products. I focus on the customers who seem to also focus on me, in a sense. George Dollar, it's really important to be good at saying no. It's a critical skill. And the faster you get at saying it, the better it goes for everybody. It doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help any customer, anybody who's interested in a business opportunity. It doesn't help anybody who you're having business discussions with to be strung along for a long time. Stringing people along doesn't improve the situation. Hello, Sam Cummins. How's the rebel life? And so when companies choose not to offer products, not to pursue a particular demographic or a certain customer base, it may be because there's no money to actually be made there. It may just be that it's a desert. You can't do it. But it also may be that for a variety of reasons, up to that point, it hasn't been possible to make profitable sales in that market sector. But new technology changes the way that customers reach out to companies and the way that companies can find customers and fill their orders. And so it's not uncommon for technology changes to drive down the cost of reaching certain difficult markets so that you go past that break-even point of it wasn't profitable, they couldn't do it, it wasn't profitable. And then you tip past that point, and new technology allows usually a small company that doesn't have a lot invested in the other thing, the other part of the market, to really take that new technology, take that new approach, take that new sales model or that new product, and take it to an underserved or an unserved segment of the market and really go all in on it. And the big companies that are already successful, that have market share in that area, might not even be aware of what's happening. And if they are aware, they might not even want those customers. It isn't profitable to pursue unprofitable work. I mean, it's a truism. Businesses don't remain healthy by doing work that doesn't pay. And so disruption often comes when for some reason the calculus changes. Yeah, George, so Hader Holsters is an example of that. And sadly, Hader Holsters has not been nearly as disruptive as I hoped, but who knows what may happen in 2019. Looking at underserved or unserved segments of the market and deciding to focus your attention on them doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be disruptive. It can make good business sense, but it might not. Like if you were only going to market your holster company to left-handed revolver carriers, maybe you can do that. Maybe that company can survive. Maybe there's enough market there to have a holster company that survives. I don't know. My suspicion is that there's not enough left-handed revolver carriers to really build a stable business on the back of that. But I could be wrong. Southpaw Wheel Gunners Unite. If you decided you wanted to build a business exclusively on right-handed Glock inside the waistband or appendix holsters, we know you can build a business on that. Lots of companies do, almost exclusively that. So there's tons of room in the market for that. Disruption also gets mentioned every time new firearms come out. Like the G43X and the G48 are not disruptive. The P365 was not disruptive in the sense of what disruption is in principle. Do new products disrupt the sales flow of existing products? Yes. Is the G43X and the G48, are they probably going to cannibalize a lot of potential future G43 sales? Yes. Are they going to have a harder time because the P365 got a year's head start and still has certain things that are advantages over the G43X and the 48? Yeah, that's real. But to introduce a marginal improvement, a slight a slight improvement in size, shootability, capacity, trigger, sights, durability, whatever it is, to introduce an incremental improvement is not disruptive. If you introduced the first subcompact handgun that fired cartridgeless, caseless rounds, and therefore could fit 25 in a P365 style package, that size, that would be disruptive. That would turn a whole bunch of things on their heads. But when I look at what's happening with my business and the kinds of things I'm trying to do, the disruptions that I'm thinking about are things that are going to interrupt my sales, that are going to interrupt the business I'm currently doing, and what I might need to do to either prevent those things from happening or get ahead of those changes. So when they come, because I can't stop them from coming, I'm already a step ahead of it. So I know if you watched my HolsterLife videos at all, I've often mentioned Gary Vaynerchuk. And I listen to his podcast. I've read his books. I think there's a lot of useful things to take from Gary V. I don't agree with him on 100% of anything, but that's, it is what it is. If you want to be better prepared for what your competitors will do to you, either deliberately or just incidentally in the course of pursuing their market, be in the habit of looking at the vulnerabilities of your business and trying to find a way to disrupt yourself. Try to figure out what you would do if you were trying to put your current company out of business. And the one that people almost always immediately jump to is, I would undercut myself on price. Okay. Anybody can do huge sales volumes while they're going out of business on margin, right up until the moment when they go out of business because they had no margin. So undercutting on price isn't really disruptive unless some change in technology means that the price can be significantly lowered and the profitability maintained or improved. This is the classic car example I mentioned earlier. The luxury automobiles that were being handmade one at a time with no assembly line, no conveyor belts, no interchangeability of parts. It didn't matter how many of those the company producing them wanted to sell. There were very few people in each country who could afford to pay for all the labor that had to go into producing that. And so Ford undercut them on price by serving a different kind of customer. Hello, Judy Katner. And that's a really interesting thing. As products tend to accumulate more premium features, there are definitely people who are willing to settle for a good enough product. And it could be something as simple as, guys used to upcharge for a color and a mid-cut sweat guard, and we're going to add a wedge to that, we're going to add a wing to that, and we're going to do 2 soft loops instead of an overhook, and all these different features that used to be upcharges the guys would add on. A lot of customers are willing to take just a really simple single adjustable retention screw holster with a DIY quick clip or a foamy on it. That's good enough for a lot of people for what they want or what they need, realistically. The vast majority of the gun-carrying public does not have to choose between carrying the latest winged-out, wedged-out, RMR-cut appendix holster with a light and 2 full-size mags with extendos or die instantly when they go out in public. That's not the actual choice most people are facing. Most people would be perfectly well served with a J-frame. Most people. Now, of course, there are exceptions, and if you're the exception and you need 10 rounds and you've got a J-frame, that's rough. But there's a reason why a lot of companies have a premium line and then a more basic consumer line. And it is because there are lots and lots of customers who want a certain amount of value and are willing to pay up to a certain point and are not willing to pay beyond that, no matter what the features are on the more premium version. And I haven't really seen holster companies get into that space yet, and that's partly because as consumer goods, holsters are relatively inexpensive already. I remember years ago, just my mind was boggled that companies like Caliban Cloak and Griffin Industries, who at the time was selling holsters made by Caliban Cloak, as far as I could tell, that they were, and I think Griffin still is, charging like 150, 160, 165 for a basic OWB in carbon fiber textured plastic with Kydex belt loops. They were those, they had their own weird belt loops. It was a thing. But I was amazed that people would pay that. And I don't have access to their sales numbers. I don't know what their numbers were actually like, but I do know that they only needed one sale for 3 of mine to have equal profit numbers. And so they didn't have to be selling a ton if their margins were that good. And certain people will spend significantly more money for the appearance, for the experience, for the social cachet of having the premium version of the product. And this is a big debate in smartphones. Guys are like, oh, do you need to have the latest? Do you need to have the Google Pixel 3? Do you need to have the iPhone XR, XS? Who knows? Do you need to have the newest one? Or is your old 6S Plus, which is what I'm shooting on right now, is your 6S Plus good enough for most of what you need to do? For me, good enough. And so when I look at things that could disrupt my business, if companies figured out how to really crack the nut of doing fully customized holsters with the range of guns and the range of options that people are used to when they think custom holster maker. That's the guy who's got 200 blue guns on the wall, and he's got, all 9 versions of the P229, and he's got everything Smith, every autoloader Smith & Wesson has made. If you've got that custom holster maker, if we got to a point where a company could produce a product that was equivalent in quality to what we can make with CNC machine molds and vacuum forming, and could do it cost effectively enough to justify tooling up for a single order and make money on that order, then the custom order world would be a totally different thing. People have talked about 3D printing. Is 3D printing the future of holsters? Maybe. What would it mean if you could go to a gun show and you could scan somebody's gun right there with their sights, their aftermarket levers, the grips they've got on it, everything they've done, their specific gun. If you could scan their firearm and produce a holster that would perform equivalently to a Kydex holster in 10 minutes. If you could 3D print a holster that would perform that well, and then all you had to do, there's no folding, there's no edge finishing, you just put belt clips on it, and they're off. We haven't really gotten there yet. If we did, and I think it's, that's not an inconceivable innovation, if you could get to the point where that process of scanning the guns and catting them out and then 3D printing a holster form to match them, if that could be automated to the point where there was basically no human labor involved, you just scan the gun, print, press print, and automation does all your CAD work for you, that'd be amazing. I don't know how to do that. If you do, call me. I have ideas. But that would be truly disruptive. Currently, the level of customization that's available for in-person appointments at a gun store or a gun show is very limited. You can pick your colors, you can pick your belt clip, and depending on how they're making them, if it's bullseye holsters, they just take your gun and heat up some plastic. You pick a pattern, they mash your gun and give it back to you. But for most companies, trying to go to a gun store and handle all the customers, all the questions, all the interaction, explain their product, and also have time to make dozens or hundreds of custom holsters in a day, it's just not feasible. But those kinds of things could become doable, could become possible. If, in footwear, if I didn't have to worry what size my foot was, And I could just go to a shoe store and say, I want a cross trainer, I want a running shoe, I want a hiking boot, and I would just sit down and they would scan my right foot, scan my left foot, and then manufacture on site immediately a set of customized shoes or boots that fit my foot, the width of the ball of my foot, the length from toe to heel, exactly with the appropriate tolerance that match the actual height and curvature of my arch. Like, if I could get a custom built shoe right there on the spot, would that change the way people shopped for shoes? I think it would. What if you had a company that would, scan your feet? They send you a box in the mail with instructions about how to sit down in front of this thing. It's a calibrated background. You photograph your feet from a couple different angles with an iPhone. You send them in the pictures, and a week later, you've got customized shoes delivered to you. I don't know if anybody's currently doing that. I know some companies have really worked toward the cracking the bespoke clothing market by saying, here's our app. You put your arms out, we scan you, we figure out your torso size, your waist size, your inseam length for your pants, your cuff length for your sleeves, your neck size, and we make you custom fitted shirts, custom fitted suits. That kind of stuff is really cool. And as that technology gets better and better, the days of having to go to a tailor and stand there while he measures those things individually, it's going to go away. There's going to be no reason to do it. And if that process is painless enough and you can do it at home rather than having to make an appointment, drive to a tailor, find parking, go inside, have your appointment, and then get your clothing modified or made from scratch, then that traditional tailoring model for a lot of people is going to completely cease to be interesting. It's not going to be an option. They're not going to want to even look at it. And so I don't know what's going to happen with holsters in the next 5 years. I'm really interested to see, because injection molding is able to handle large volume with good, consistent quality. You can eliminate a lot of labor by having all your edges rounded, all your holes put in the mold, having logoing, model information, all the things that we would stamp or engrave. They're built into the mold. You just run the parts. You can make thousands and thousands and thousands of them. But if you need to make a design change, or a gun manufacturer updates their dimensions, makes a change to their tooling, it's not super fast to revamp injection molded stuff. And if you have a lot of existing product already out there in distribution and then a change comes down the pike, this is the constant problem that large scale manufacturing has run into over and over and over again, where stuff will be manufactured and there'll be a lot of it out there, and then a new version, a new product, a new iteration, a new something obsoletes a whole bunch of the product that's already been put out into distribution. And that's a major challenge. Tooling is expensive, says Brent Fernandez. Yes, it is. Now, if I could 3D print injection molding tools, so that without needing to, who knows how the workflow is going to change. Injection molding tooling is expensive, says Brent. Yes. 3D printing is doing amazing things, and the cost of that technology is coming down and down and down. But for most applications, it's still so much slower, and the end result is so much less durable than what you get from an equivalent injection molded part, that for a lot of things, it still just isn't remotely cost effective. It's fantastic for prototyping, and interestingly, you can create a lot of geometries with 3D printing that are not conventionally possible with injection molding, just because of issues with mold entrapment and overhangs. And so that's interesting, because 3D printing unlocks a different way of thinking about stuff. I'm really interested to see what's going to happen with generative design and CAD in the next few years, as I've looked at what companies like Autodesk are doing, or what Siemens and NX and those companies, what their CAD CAM platforms have in terms of defining a few key points, defining loads and distribution, and then having the computer create hundreds of potential iterations that can accomplish the task of the piece you need designed. They tend to make these very sort of alien organic shapes that are very lightweight, exceptionally strong, usually asymmetrical, and not at all like what we would conventionally model, when engineers think of. The trade-off is they're often exceptionally difficult to manufacture. And so technologies that allow those things to be sliced and built from pieces, or generative technologies like stereolithography, SLA printing, that allow you to make really smooth, beautiful organic shapes, that stuff's really awesome. It's not fast enough or strong enough yet. So I'm excited to see what's going to happen in the holster industry in 2019. I don't think we're going to see a lot of major disruption. I feel like we've really gotten close to the end of what can be accomplished within the Kydex bolt-around sheet plastic thermoforming field, and that any major innovation beyond that that's going to disrupt the holster market as we know it is going to have to be some kind of innovation that either uses different materials or a completely different production process that allows customization to be quicker and low cost, that allows a kind of modularity that we don't have yet, or produces improvements in comfort or wearability that are significantly beyond what we currently have. And any of those, and especially a company that was able to hit a couple of those points, if they could give you a fully customized holster and they could do it quickly and inexpensively and it was more comfortable, then yeah, it would disrupt the holster industry. So I'm playing around with 3D printing. I bought my first 3D printer at the end of 2019, and that's been fun. I've been 3D printing things all week this week, all kinds of fun stuff. So we'll see what happens with that. I'm going to SHOT Show in a couple weeks. I'm hoping to do at least one HolsterLife broadcast from SHOT Show. As usual, I'll be hanging around with guys like John Hutman, probably Tom Kelly, hopefully Tony Katner, the usual suspects, Brent Fernandez, Mark Lancaster, all the fun guys. Jessica Hazelar from Eclipse Holsters will be around. So disruption isn't the same thing as innovation. Not all improvements are disruptive. Not all industries are ripe for disruption, although the speed at which industries mature and become ripe for major disruption is increasing. But that's because the development cycle of virtually everything is increasing. The speed at which the current generation of technology is made obsolete is just mind-boggling to me, which is really exciting because the idea of building a business that does a single thing a certain way and then having the business just plod along for the next 40 to 50 years doing just that thing just that way so does not interest me. I have no interest in being a part of or owning a company like that. And so I'm really excited. One of the really fun things about having these CNC machines and now having a 3D printer is that HP has a printer that can do holsters fast and durable, but it's a 7-figure machine. Well, Mark Lewis, what's stopping you, man? I mean, that sounds like a done deal to me. 7 figures? Take it to one gun show. Make all the Taurus holsters that you need and, pay the machine off and laugh your way to the bank. So one of the things I really enjoy about having these CNC machines and now having a 3D printer is that I can move into any other industry that I want. Anything that interests me, I can play around with and make. I can 3D print all kinds of crazy stuff, and I've got enough machinery to make, who knows, almost anything I want, which is really exciting because I don't stay interested in things for a super long time. I'm a little bit ADD about what interests me currently. And that means that I need to have constant access to creative challenges that push me to think in new ways and learn new things to do. Otherwise, I just get bored. Last thing about disruption, and then I'll be off for the night. I was thinking about disruption in terms of jiu-jitsu because I was working this past week in class. We were working on escapes from bottom side control, which if you know any jiu-jitsu, being on bottom side control is a wretched place to be. And most brand new white belts, one of the first things they learn is like the, bridge escape or a shrimp escape from mount. Usually called a bridge escape from mount. Or a bridge escape from side control. You bring your heels in, you do a big bridge, you turn your shoulder, you frame, and you try to make one giant movement that like suddenly improves your position. And it's great in concept, but if you actually roll with anybody who's reasonably competent, they're never going to give you enough room to make that whole escape in one big bridging motion. And so my teacher in class on Thursday night was focusing on us incrementally improving our framing and improving our hip position with small motions, small movements, the kind that even if the person is on top of you with a ton of pressure chest to chest, you still have the ability to make these small marginal improvements. And that's actually the way that I think about making my business more immune to disruption. If I sit still for 2 years in this industry, I will be significantly behind the curve. Hello, Gabe New. If I let myself rest on the way that I'm doing it for 2 years, I will then have a whole bunch more uphill climbing to do to get back to where I wanted to be. Hello, Scott Enns. And so committing myself to learning something new at least every month is a way for me to taste all the new ideas that are coming into the market. I look at all the new holster designs that I can and just think, how did they do that? Why did they do that? Is it likely to work? And what do their customers say about it? Are they charging more for it? Are they charging less for it? Are they trying new materials? Like, what's going on? And if I can improve in small ways every single day, then many of the things that are wrong with my business currently won't remain and grow to the point where they become catastrophic vulnerabilities that would leave me vulnerable to just a business-ending disruption. The law can also disrupt. If you make a certain class of products, say, bump stocks, and suddenly they're banned, that's a business disruption, and it has nothing to do with the market. You can't blame that on competition. You can't blame that on supply chain. You can't blame that on Facebook ads not performing the way that they're supposed to. You know, if the federal government decides to ban your product, you've got a problem. And it is going to be interesting to see what happens in the next 2 years in terms of how firearms rights are or aren't protected and what that does to the gun carrying public. Because most people who carry firearms are law-abiding people who respect the laws. Hey, Anthony Fitch, thanks for stopping in. And generally respect things like gun-free zones. I know that there's a difference between there's a difference between able and allowed. I understand that. And many people choose to carry firearms in places where they are not legally allowed to, which is fine. I have no problem with you making the decision for yourself how much risk you're willing to accept to keep tools on your person to protect yourself. Totally on you. I'm fine with it. But if the laws become more restrictive, most gun owners, most law-abiding gun carriers will tend to obey those laws rather than break them. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting. Thanks all for stopping in. I will try to do at least one more of these before SHOT Show happens and at least one from SHOT Show. So far, I haven't caught wind of any really wild or exciting things coming out at SHOT Show in the small, subcompact, single stack, stack and a half handgun market. The couple of new Glock pistols on the G43 platform seem to be the main thing folks are talking about, and they're interesting, but they look like marginal improvements over what's already around. Thanks, Robert Tyndall. Appreciate you stopping by. Have a great night. As always, if you have any questions or ideas or there are particular topics you want me to discuss, drop me a line on Facebook or Instagram. Send me a message, and I will check it out. Thanks, guys. Have a great night.